The massive hangar doors sealed shut with a heavy thud that echoed through the chamber. 300 cadets stood in perfect formation, their polished uniforms gleaming under the bright lights. Today was the day they'd all been waiting for. The bonding ceremony. The moment when each graduate would receive their dragon, a living war machine that would merge with their mind and become their partner for life. Cadet Torrin stood near the back of the formation. His uniform wasn't as crisp as the others. His boots had seen better days. While the other cadets came from military families, warrior bloodlines that stretched back generations, Torrin was different. He was lowborn. His family worked in the recycling plants on the outer stations. He'd only gotten into the academy because of a computer error in the application system. At least that's what everyone whispered behind his back. Commander Harkos walked along the line of cadets, his cape dragging across the polished floor. He was a decorated war hero, a legend among the Veldran people. His own dragon had destroyed 12 enemy carriers during the border wars. When he stopped in front of each cadet, it was like a god bestowing a blessing. One by one the cadets stepped forward. One by one their dragons were revealed, massive, powerful machines that hummed with deadly grace. Each dragon was matched to its pilot based on their skills, their honor, their family status. The crowd of observers cheered with each bonding. Parents wept with pride. Instructors nodded in approval. Then Harkos stopped in front of Torrin. The hangar fell completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the metal floor. The commander's smile spread slowly across his face, but there was no warmth in it. It was the smile of someone who'd been planning something for a very long time. Torrin's stomach twisted into knots. He knew that look. He'd seen it before in the hallways, in the training rooms, every time he'd somehow managed to pass a test or complete a mission. Cadet Torrin, Harkos announced, his voice carrying through the entire hangar. Step forward and receive your dragon. Torrin's legs felt like lead, but he forced himself to walk to the center of the ceremony floor. Behind him he heard whispers starting. Nervous laughter. Someone muttered something about the lowborn finally getting what he deserves. This dragon, Harkos continued, has been specially selected for you. A perfect match, I believe. The commander pressed a button on his wrist device. The containment field 20 meters away flickered and died. Smoke cleared slowly, dramatically. The crowd leaned forward to see. Then the gasp started. The dragon that emerged from the smoke was huge, bigger than most of the others. But something was terribly wrong. Its scales were pure white. Not the silver white of honor or the pearl white of royalty. This was the white of bone. The white of death. Albino. Torrin felt his heart stop. In Veldran culture, albino dragons were considered cursed. Bad omens. They appeared maybe once in 1,000 births, and when they did, they were usually destroyed immediately. Seeing one was supposed to bring death to everyone nearby. But that wasn't even the worst part. The dragon's wings hung at terrible, wrong angles. The left one drooped like it was broken, sparking with corrupt code that flickered across the biomechanical surface like a disease. The right wing twitched and spasmed, unable to fold properly. The flight systems, the most important part of any dragon, were completely destroyed. Corrupted beyond any normal repair. This dragon would never fly. Could never fly. It was worthless. The laughter started small. A few snickers from the front row. Then it spread like wildfire through the crowd. Cadets who'd ignored Torrin for years now openly laughed at his humiliation. Parents covered their mouths, trying to hide their amusement. Even some of the instructors cracked smiles. Torrin just stood there, frozen. His dream, the one thing that had kept him going through years of mockery and isolation, was dying right in front of him. He'd studied harder than anyone, trained longer, pushed himself past every limit, all for this moment. And now this. Defective wings for a defective pilot, Commander Harkos announced loudly, playing to the crowd like an actor on a stage. I'd say that's fitting, wouldn't you? The crowd roared with laughter. Torrin's face burned. He wanted to run, to disappear, to be anywhere but here. But his legs wouldn't move. He just stared at the broken dragon with its bone-white scales and ruined wings. The dragon's eyes, dim and flickering, turned to look at him. For just a second, Torrin could have sworn he saw something in that gaze. Not anger. Not shame. Something else. Something almost like recognition. Like the dragon understood exactly what this felt like. In the very back of the hangar, hidden in the shadows near the maintenance entrance, Beth Porter stood with her arms crossed. She was the only human at the academy hired 3 years ago to fix the systems that the Veldran considered beneath them. Plumbing. Electrical. The boring stuff. She'd been to dozens of these ceremonies. Watched hundreds of happy cadets bond with their dragons. But she'd never seen anything like this. This wasn't just a poor match or a training dragon for a weak student. This was deliberate cruelty. Her hands clenched into tight fists. Her jaw locked. She'd seen bullies before, spent half her childhood dealing with them back on Earth. But this was something else. This was institutional. Calculated. Mean. Beth looked at the albino dragon with its broken wings, then at the kid standing alone in the center of the floor while everyone laughed at him. Something in her chest tightened. She'd come to this academy to do a job and collect a paycheck. Keep her head down. Stay out of alien politics. But watching this, Beth made a decision. Tonight she was going to take a closer look at that broken dragon. Because in her experience, when everyone agreed something was worthless and impossible to fix, they usually weren't looking hard enough. And if there was one thing humans were good at, it was seeing potential in things everyone else had thrown away. The condemned hangar sat on the far edge of the academy grounds, away from everything else. Nobody came here unless they had to. It was where they stored broken equipment, damaged training modules, and now one worthless dragon. Torrin sat on the cold metal floor with his back against the storage crate. He'd been here for hours, just staring at the thing that was supposed to be his partner. The pale dragon lay in the center of the hangar under harsh work lights. Its white scales caught the light in strange ways, making it look almost ghostly, like it was already dead. But it wasn't dead. Not yet, anyway. The dragon's eyes would occasionally flicker open, glowing faintly in the darkness. They'd track across the room slowly, then settle on Torrin. He could feel the weight of that gaze. It wasn't angry or accusing. If anything, it felt tired. Sad even. Like the dragon knew exactly what was coming tomorrow. The Academy had been very clear about the protocol. Defective dragons with neural corruption were too dangerous to keep around. Too expensive to maintain. In the morning, technicians would arrive with euthanasia equipment. They'd shut down the dragon's core systems one by one until nothing remained but an empty shell. Then they'd recycle the parts. Torrin had asked if he could at least stay with it tonight. The request had made Commander Harkos laugh, but he'd allowed it. Probably thought it was funny, the defective cadet keeping vigil over his defective dragon. They're going to euthanize it tomorrow, a voice said from somewhere in the shadows. Torrin jumped to his feet, his hand instinctively going to where a weapon would be if he had one. But cadets weren't allowed weapons off the training grounds. A figure stepped into the light. Human. Female. Wearing grease-stained coveralls and carrying a tool belt that looked like it weighed 20 pounds. Beth Porter. The maintenance contractor. Torrin had seen her around the academy, usually crawling through access tunnels or elbow-deep in some broken machine. The other cadets barely acknowledged her existence. Sorry, Beth said, holding up her hands. Didn't mean to scare you. I've been watching the dragon for about an hour. Wanted to get a good look at it without everyone breathing down my neck. She walked closer, her boots clanking on the metal floor. The dragon's eyes followed her movement, but it didn't react otherwise. Too weak, probably. The flight corruption spread to the neural core, Beth continued, pulling out a handheld scanner. The device beeped softly as she waved it over the dragon's damaged wing. Standard protocol says it's irreparable. Too expensive to save. Too different to be worth it. Torrin watched her work for a moment, confused. Why would a maintenance worker care about a dragon? That wasn't her job. She fixed plumbing and electrical systems, not biomechanical war machines. Then why are you here? His voice came out hollow, empty. He'd cried himself out hours ago. Beth didn't answer right away. She knelt beside the dragon's left wing, the one that hung at that terrible broken angle. She ran the scanner along the biomechanical tissue where metal met flesh, where wires connected to nerves. The dragon flinched slightly but didn't pull away. Easy there, Beth murmured to it like she was talking to a scared animal. Just taking a look. Not gonna hurt you. She studied the scanner's readout, her eyebrows pulling together. Then she moved to the other wing, repeating the process. Torrin noticed she was being careful, gentle even. Most Veldran technicians treated dragons like equipment. Tools. But Beth touched the creature like it could feel pain. After several minutes, she stood up and brushed the dust off her knees. I looked at the diagnostic data during your ceremony, she said, meeting Torrin's eyes. Downloaded it right from the main database. Spent the whole afternoon going through it line by line. And? Torrin couldn't help the small flicker of hope that tried to ignite in his chest. He crushed it immediately. Hope was dangerous. Hope just made the disappointment hurt worse. Everyone says it's broken, Beth said carefully. She turned to look at the dragon again, tilting her head like she was seeing something nobody else could. I think they're wrong. The words hung in the air between them. The Academy's best engineers looked at it, Torrens said. He'd heard them talking during the ceremony. Master technicians with decades of experience. They'd all agreed, this dragon was beyond saving. They said. They gave up, Beth interrupted. There was an edge to her voice now, something sharp. They took one look, saw that it didn't fit their neat little boxes and wrote it off. Irreparable. Defective. Not worth the effort. She turned back to Torren, and he saw something burning in her eyes. Determination maybe. Or anger. Look, she continued, I can't promise anything. I'm not some genius engineer or dragon specialist. I fix toilets and rewire circuit boards. But give me 3 days. 3 days to dig into this thing and see what's actually wrong with it. If I can't figure anything out, you're no worse off than you are right now. Torren looked at the dragon, then back at this strange human woman who'd appeared out of nowhere with an impossible offer. Why would you help me? He asked quietly. You don't know me. This isn't your problem. You could get in trouble with the Academy for wasting resources on something they've already condemned. Beth's expression softened. A tired smile crossed her face, the smile of someone who'd seen too much unfairness in the world and decided to push back anyway. Because where I come from, we don't throw people away just because they're different, she said simply. Or dragons for that matter. Back on Earth, I grew up in the scrapyards. My dad ran a salvage operation. Everyone would bring him their broken stuff. Machines they said couldn't be fixed, technology that was too old or too weird to bother with. She glanced at the dragon again. You know what he taught me? Most things aren't actually broken. They just need someone willing to look at them differently. Someone who doesn't give up when the solution isn't obvious. Beth met his eyes again. So yeah, 3 days. Let me try. What have you got to lose? Torren looked at his dragon, at its bone-white scales and ruined wings. At its dim eyes that held what looked like the last fading spark of hope. What did he have to lose? Everything was already gone. Okay, he whispered. 3 days. Beth's smile widened. She immediately started pulling tools from her belt, already moving toward the dragon with purpose. Good. Then we'd better get started. We've got a lot of work to do and not much time to do it. By the second day, Beth had consumed 6 energy drinks, 4 protein bars, and exactly 0 hours of sleep. Her eyes were bloodshot and her hands trembled slightly from the caffeine, but she couldn't stop now. Not when she was this close to understanding. The condemned hangar had become her laboratory. Cables snaked across the floor like metallic vines. Diagnostic screens floated in mid-air, displaying data that scrolled faster than most people could read. Tools lay scattered everywhere. Some human-made, some Veldran, some improvised combinations of both that probably violated a dozen safety regulations. And in the center of it all, the albino dragon lay perfectly still, its systems opened up like a patient on an operating table. The breakthrough had come around hour 6 of the first night. Beth had been tracing the neural pathways in the dragon's spine, mapping how the biological brain connected to the mechanical flight systems. That's when she'd noticed something the Veldran engineers had completely missed. The corruption wasn't random. It had a pattern. Beth had pulled up the standard Veldran neural interface specifications and laid them side by side with the dragon's actual neural structure. The difference had made her laugh out loud, a slightly manic sound that had startled Torren awake from where he dozed off in the corner. The albino mutation hadn't made the dragon defective. It had made it incompatible. The dragon's neural architecture operated on completely different frequencies than standard Veldran systems. Every time the standard interface tried to connect, it was like trying to tune a radio to the wrong station. Nothing but static and corruption. The dragon wasn't broken. It was trying desperately to communicate in a language the Veldran technology couldn't understand. It's like. Beth had explained to Torren, gesturing wildly at the screens, imagine you only speak English, right? And someone keeps shouting at you in German, getting angrier and angrier that you don't understand. That's what the Veldran interface has been doing to this dragon since it was born. No wonder its systems are going haywire. Now, 48 hours later, Beth was deep in the most delicate part of the work. Her entire right arm was inside the dragon's neural cavity, carefully disconnecting the biomechanical conduits that linked its brain to its wings. One wrong move and she could cause permanent damage. Talk to me, she murmured to the dragon, watching its vital signs on the nearby monitor. Let me know if this hurts. The dragon's eyes flickered. A soft rumbling sound came from deep in its chest. Not aggressive, more like acknowledgement. Good. That's good. Just a little bit more. The hangar doors suddenly slammed open with a bang that echoed off the walls. Commander Harko strode in, flanked by 2 Academy security officers. His face was tight with barely controlled anger. Behind them, a handful of curious instructors and cadets had gathered in the doorway to watch. Mechanic Porter, Harkos's voice cut through the hangar like a blade. End this embarrassment immediately. That creature cannot fly. You're wasting Academy resources on a lost cause. Beth didn't look up. Couldn't look up. She was in the middle of disconnecting a critical neural junction. One slip and she'd sever the connection permanently. My contract gives me discretion over salvage projects, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Check Clause 7, Section 3. This is not salvage. You declared it irreparable yesterday morning, Beth interrupted, finally pulling her arm free. The neural conduit came loose in her hand, trailing fiber optic cables that glowed faintly blue. You signed the disposal authorization yourself. That makes it salvage. And I'm not done with it. She finally turned to face him, wiping grease off her forehead with the back of her hand. She probably looked like a mess, covered in biofluid, hair sticking up in every direction, dark circles under her eyes. But she met the commander's glare without flinching. Harkos's expression darkened. He took a step closer, using his height advantage to loom over her. The intimidation tactic might have worked on a cadet, but Beth had dealt with worse back on Earth. Veldran engineering is flawless, he said coldly. Our best minds examined this dragon. Engineers with decades of experience. If they could not repair it, you, a human maintenance worker, certainly cannot. That's because they were trying to fix it the Veldran way, Beth shot back. She grabbed one of the floating screens and spun it toward him, showing the neural mapping data. Look at this. Really look at it. This dragon's neural structure doesn't respond to dominance-based command hierarchies. It never will. She pulled up more data, highlighting the connection points. You built your entire bonding system on rigid control and submission. The pilot dominates, the dragon submits. Strict hierarchies. Absolute obedience. But this dragon can't submit. Its mutation made that impossible at a fundamental level. Its brain is literally wired differently. Then it's useless, Harkos said flatly. No. Beth's voice was firm. It just needs a different approach. She walked over to her equipment pile and pulled out a device about the size of her palm. It looked crude compared to Veldran technology, more wires and exposed circuits than sleek design. But it hummed with quiet power. This is an adaptive neural interface, she explained. We use them on Earth for complex robotics and industrial settings. Humans don't pilot through dominance. We build partnerships, flexible systems, adaptive protocols. It's messy by your standards, sure. But it's effective. Harkos stared at the device like it was something obscene. You cannot seriously intend to install human technology into a Veldran dragon. Already started. Beth gestured at the dragon. I'm ripping out the Veldran command interface entirely and rebuilding it from scratch. Human principles, human protocols. And the wings. She pointed at the damaged appendages. I'm not fixing them. I'm redesigning them. Redundant systems, adaptive surfaces, real-time adjustment capabilities. Controlled chaos. This is madness. This is innovation, Beth countered. And you're going to let me finish because that disposal authorization you signed gives me legal salvage rights for 72 hours. I've got 24 left. The two stared at each other. Finally, Harkos turned sharply and marched toward the exit. You're wasting your time, he called back. But don't expect Academy resources to clean up your failure. The doors slammed shut behind him. Beth let out a long breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking worse now, but not from caffeine. That was... Torrin started from his corner. Stupid. Beth suggested with a weak laugh. Yeah, probably. She turned back to the dragon, running her hand along its pale scales. You hear that, friend? We've got one day. You ready to do something impossible? The dragon's eyes brightened just a little. Beth could have sworn it looked almost hopeful. You really think this will work? Torrin asked, moving closer. Beth's hands were already moving again, connecting cables, initializing systems, building something that had never existed before. I think your dragon was never broken, she said softly. Just waiting for someone who spoke its language. Trial day came too fast. Torrin barely slept the night before, his mind racing through everything that could go wrong. And there was a lot that could go wrong. The Academy's main flight arena was packed. Every seat in the observation deck was filled with instructors, visiting dignitaries and family members who'd come to watch their children perform. The arena itself was massive, a controlled airspace the size of 10 football fields, filled with holographic obstacles and target drones that could simulate real combat conditions. One by one, cadets would demonstrate basic combat maneuvers, attack runs, evasive patterns, emergency protocols. It was all standard stuff, designed to show that each pilot could handle their dragon under pressure. The pass rate was usually around 90%. Failures were rare. But failures meant expulsion from the academy. No second chances. No appeals. Torin stood in the prep hangar trying to keep his breakfast down. Around him, other cadets were doing final checks on their dragons. The machines gleamed with fresh polish, their scales shimmering in perfect military colors. Deep blues, gunmetal grays, honor reds. Standard. Beautiful. Normal. His dragon crouched in the corner and even now it drew stares. The bone-white scales seemed to glow under the harsh lights. The wings, those strange asymmetric wings that Beth had rebuilt, were folded against its body, but everyone could see the human modifications. Exposed cables. Adjustable panels. Nothing sleek about them. They looked like something cobbled together in a junkyard. Which honestly wasn't far from the truth. The entire academy had gathered to watch. Word had spread fast about the human mechanics crazy project. Everyone wanted to see the inevitable failure. Torin could feel their eyes on him as he walked across the arena floor. Could hear the whispers. The barely hidden laughter. Commander Harkos sat front and center in the reviewing stand, his arms crossed. Even from this distance, Torin could see the satisfaction on his face. The commander had already won as far as he was concerned. This was just the final humiliation before Torin was kicked out forever. Beth appeared at Torin's elbow, carrying a data pad and looking only slightly less exhausted than she had for the past 3 days. She'd finally slept for about 4 hours last night, but only because Torin had physically dragged her away from the dragon and forced her to rest. Okay, she said, pulling up the final diagnostics. I've run every test I can think of. All systems are green. The interface is responding perfectly. The wings are calibrated. Everything that can be ready is ready. But? Torin asked, hearing the hesitation in her voice. Beth bit her lip. But we've never actually flight tested it. We ran ground simulations, sure. But real flight? With you in the cockpit? This is the first time. Great. Fantastic. Torin felt his stomach twist harder. Hey. Beth grabbed his shoulder, forcing him to look at her. Listen to me. This dragon is special. I've been working with machines my whole life and I've never seen anything like it. The neural response times alone are incredible. It wants to fly. You just have to trust it. What if I can't? Torin's voice came out smaller than he wanted. Then you'll fail, get kicked out, and we'll both know we tried. Beth's smile was lopsided but genuine. But I don't think that's going to happen. You've got this. The announcement system crackled to life. Cadet Torin. You're up. Report to launch position 3. This was it. Torin climbed the ladder to the dragon's cockpit. The new human interface glowed soft blue around the pilot's seat, so different from the harsh red of Veldrin systems. He strapped in and the neural connection initialized. Felt different. Not the crushing pressure of Veldrin dominance protocols. This was gentler. Like shaking hands with someone instead of grabbing them by the throat. Remember, Beth called up to him, standing at the base of the ladder, don't try to control it. Don't force it. Just fly with it. Partnership, not dominance. Torin nodded, not trusting his voice. The dragon's systems hummed to life. The sound was warmer than standard models. Less mechanical. Almost organic. Through the neural link, Torin could feel the dragon's presence. Not as a tool waiting for orders but as something aware. Eager even. The rebuilt wings began to unfold. They moved in ways that standard wings didn't, panels shifting, adjusting, the asymmetric design looking even stranger in motion. The human modifications were obvious. Crude. Ugly by Veldrin standards. Whispers of disgust rippled through the observation deck. Someone laughed. Another person made a comment about human trash engineering. Commander Harkos leaned forward in his seat, barely hiding his smile. Then Torin and the dragon launched. The takeoff was rough. The dragon lurched upward with more power than Torin expected, and for a heart-stopping moment he thought they were going to crash into the arena ceiling. But then the wings caught the air and everything clicked. The dragon didn't move like the other models. Where they flew with rigid, programmed precision, every movement calculated and controlled, this one moved with organic fluidity. The wings constantly shifted, adjusting to tiny changes in air pressure and velocity. It was like watching a bird instead of a machine. The trial computer announced the first test, obstacle course. Holographic barriers materialized throughout the arena, creating a complex maze that had to be navigated at high speed. Standard dragons would plot an optimal path and execute it flawlessly, their movements efficient and predictable. The bone dragon flew through it like water flowing downhill. It didn't calculate the perfect route, it adapted in real time, the wings responding to obstacles before Torin even registered them. It threaded through gaps that seemed too narrow, rolled and twisted with impossible grace. The strange, asymmetric design that looked so wrong on the ground became beautiful in flight. The crowd went quiet. Next test, combat simulation. Target drones appeared, firing mock weapons. Standard procedure was to maintain defensive distance and take them out systematically. The bone dragon went on the attack. It moved faster than standard dragons could track, the adaptive systems letting it change direction in ways that should have been impossible. The corrupted neural system that couldn't accept rigid Veldrin commands responded to Beth's adaptive interface instantaneously, thought to action with zero delay. Instructors were leaning forward in their seats now. The whispers had stopped. Everyone was watching. Emergency maneuver test. Simulated engine failure. System corruption. Every dragon's nightmare scenario. The bone dragon handled it like it was nothing. When its left wing system temporarily failed, the right wing adapted automatically, compensating with micro-adjustments that kept them stable. Redundant systems kicked in seamlessly. This was exactly what Beth had designed for, controlled chaos that could handle the unexpected. When Torin finally landed, the arena was completely silent. He climbed out of the cockpit on shaking legs. His heart was hammering so hard he could barely breathe. He looked up at the score display, unable to process what he was seeing. Perfect scores. Across every category. And his completion time was 15 seconds faster than any other cadet in Academy history. Beth stood at the hangar entrance, arms crossed, a small smile on her face. She caught his eye and gave him a tiny nod. The dragon that was supposed to fail hadn't just passed. It had shattered every record in the book. Commander Harkos slammed his fist on the table so hard that 2 of the Academy board members actually jumped in their seats. His face had gone from its normal blue-gray color to something approaching purple. "This is impossible," he shouted, pulling up the flight data on the central display for the 5th time. "The scores are falsified. They have to be. There's no way that defective creature could have." "Commander." Elder Vex, the head of the board, held up one hand for silence. She was old enough to have fought in the original colony wars, and even Harkos knew better than to ignore her. "The flight recorders don't lie. We've verified the data 3 times already. Then the human did something to the recorders. Hacked them. Modified the code." "The biometric scans match perfectly," another board member interrupted, scrolling through pages of data. "Real-time vital signs from both pilot and dragon. Combat simulation results verified by 6 independent systems. The performance was genuine." Harkos opened his mouth then closed it again. His perfect humiliation had turned into something else entirely. Something that made him look like a fool instead of Torin. "Summon the human," Elder Vex said quietly. "I want to hear her explanation directly." Beth got the message an hour later. She'd been in the condemned hangar, helping Torin clean biofluid off the dragon's scales, when the official summons arrived. Appearance before the Academy board was mandatory. Refusal meant immediate contract termination and deportation. "This is bad," Torin said, reading over her shoulder. "The board only convenes for serious violations. They're going to accuse you of something. Let them." Beth wiped her hands on a rag and grabbed her data pad. "I've got nothing to hide. Every modification is documented. Every test result is backed up 3 times." The board chamber was intimidating by design. A circular room with the board seated in elevated positions, looking down at whoever stood in the center. "Meant to make you feel small. Judge." Beth walked to the center mark and stood with her shoulders back. She'd faced worse than a bunch of angry administrators. "Mechanic Porter," Elder Vex began. "You've caused quite a disruption. We have questions about your modifications to Cadet Torin's dragon." "I'm happy to answer anything," Beth said. Commander Harkos leaned forward. "Explain how a condemned dragon with catastrophic neural corruption suddenly achieved perfect flight scores. And remember, lying to this board is grounds for immediate expulsion from Academy grounds." Beth pulled up her data pad and transmitted her files to the central display. Neural scans. System diagnostics. Design schematics. Everything she discovered over those 3 sleepless days. "You want to know what I found?" She expanded the dragon's neural scan, highlighting specific pathways in glowing blue. The albino mutation wasn't a defect. It was an evolution. This dragon has the capability to bond with multiple neural architectures, not just Veldrin. She rotated the 3D model, showing the comparison between standard dragons and the albino variant. Your corruption was actually the dragon trying desperately to adapt to a system it was fundamentally incompatible with. Imagine trying to run modern software on hardware that speaks a completely different language. It's going to look like corruption, but really it's just a mismatch. One of the board members, a younger instructor named Kelrose, leaned forward. You're saying our bonding technology is flawed? I'm saying it's inflexible, Beth corrected. She pulled up more data, Veldrin interface protocols, command hierarchies, neural dominance patterns. You built a system that demands absolute conformity, rigid command structures, dominance hierarchies, total control from the pilot over the dragon. She gestured at the display. And don't get me wrong, that works great. Your dragons are incredibly effective. But only when they fit the exact specifications you designed for. The second you get natural variation, something that doesn't match your template, the whole system breaks down. This dragon doesn't respond to dominance, she continued. It responds to partnership, to flexible, adaptive communication. You saw that as broken because it didn't fit your specifications. But the dragon wasn't the problem. The interface was. Elder Vex studied the data carefully. And humans can bond with it because... Beth's expression softened. This was the part that mattered. Because we're used to working with broken things, she said simply. Including ourselves. Humans don't come off an assembly line. We're messy. Chaotic. Every single one of us is different, and our technology reflects that. We build systems designed for outcasts and misfits because we know what it's like to be underestimated. She looked around at each board member. Your perfection created a system so rigid that it rejects natural variation. We build systems that adapt, that learn, that work with differences instead of trying to force everything into the same shape. The silence in the chamber was heavy. Commander Harkos broke it with a harsh laugh. So your solution is to corrupt our dragons with inferior human technology? To abandon centuries of Veldrin engineering excellence? My solution, Beth said evenly, was to save a living creature you'd given up on. And to help a cadet you were trying to humiliate. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty. The board members talked quietly among themselves for several minutes. Finally, Elder Vex raised her hand for silence. We've reached a decision. Cadet Torin may remain at the academy. She paused. However, the human modifications must be removed. The dragon must be brought to proper standards or it cannot be used in academy operations. Beth's heart sank. They were going to rip out everything she'd built. Force the dragon back into a system that would kill it slowly. She heard footsteps behind her. Torin walked into the chamber, his face set with determination. Then I'm leaving, he said clearly. Elder Vex's expression hardened. You understand that means the end of your military career? You'll never. I understand, Torin interrupted. And I'm leaving anyway. He walked to stand beside Beth, facing the board together. Thank you for the opportunity, he said. But I won't let you destroy what makes my dragon special just to fit your idea of perfection. They walked out of the board chamber together. The bone dragon was waiting in the corridor, its pale scales gleaming under the lights. It fell into step behind them, wings folded carefully against its body. As they crossed the main hangar heading for the exit, something strange happened. The condemned section, where damaged dragons were kept before termination, suddenly came alive with sound. Warning alarms blared. Containment fields flickered. 3 dragons that had been scheduled for euthanization were powering up. Their eyes glowed with awareness. Their systems flickered and sparked as they fought against the restraints holding them down. Beth stopped walking. She pulled up her scanner and swept it across the awakening dragons. Her eyes went wide. Torin, these dragons. They all have similar neural patterns to yours. Different mutations, but the same core incompatibility with Veldrin systems. Dragons that were never broken. Just different. Just waiting for someone who could understand them. Beth looked at Torin, then back at the 3 awakening dragons. Looks like we've got more work to do, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face. They didn't leave alone. The bone dragon helped them release the 3 condemned dragons from their restraints. 4 defective machines that the academy had thrown away, walking out together behind a human mechanic and an outcast pilot. Behind them, Commander Harkos stood at his office window watching them leave. His perfect system, the one he'd built his entire reputation on, had just been proven imperfect by a human maintenance worker. The academy would continue. The Veldrin would keep building their dragons the same way they always had. Perfect, rigid, uncompromising. But somewhere out there, Beth Porter was building something different. Something that didn't demand perfection. Something that valued the outcasts, the different ones, the dragons that didn't fit the mold. And that truth, that his way wasn't the only way, that perfection might actually be a weakness, terrified Harkos more than any enemy fleet ever could. Because if he was wrong about this, what else might he be wrong about? The end.